We're starting a new series, and in this series we're exploring how technology can help teaching world language. And we've got Crystal with us, and my first question to Crystal is really, why do we want to use technology in the world language classroom?
Technology brings new possibilities to the world language classroom. It provides innovative ways for teachers to engage students. And also it helps teachers to motivate learners, especially those learners who are not very into world language learning at the very beginning. And then teachers can create games, technology platforms so that learners can play while they're learning without being aware of the learning part. So that's pretty cool.
Okay, so learning is one of these things that we talk a lot about, gamification, making games and making just the learning process a little bit more fun. And the other thing is obviously that we're orienting kids to use things they're using anyway. And especially here in the United States, when we're teaching world language really in high school. In other countries, we start a lot earlier. In the United States, in some places, we start earlier, but not always. And so it is really at that age where most of them, not all, but many of them have access to technology, whether it's school-supplied technology. For example, in the school districts my kids go to, it's a Chromebook, but it can be a personal device, it can be an iPad, my favorite device, or it can be other devices as well. They also have their phones very often. So providing them something they have access to and can be playful in things that are more used to it usually helps. What else works in the classroom with technology?
I think it also helps teachers to save time. Because, once you create a game or some activities on the platform, it's easier for teachers to, adapt to a different situation, different classroom for a different group of students. And also it saves designing time and grading time because a lot of platforms actually provide feedback on the spot. Once students finish everything, the feedback is there for them to review. But this really helps teachers because teachers do not have to grade everything they assign to students.
So when I think about that, I think about what is the barrier. And the barrier often, there are a few barriers to teachers using technology. And I think the first of them is finding the right things to use in the language classroom. And this is why we're here. We're going to help you find the right things you can use in your classroom. It's not going to be everything that's possible, but it's going to give you some tools that you can start using. The second thing is there is a cost at the beginning. You have to select, you have to find activities or to create the activities. And that's a little bit of a barrier, but you have to think about it, I think, in a way that is connected to your goals. We want kids to learn, and that will help them learn better. And the second one, and that is really important, is there will be some work at the beginning, but as you get used to it and as you create these activities, you can just use them again and again and again, and you don't have to create them every semester from scratch. Just like anything else you're creating for your classroom, once you have it, you can change it a little bit, but it's there, ready to be used. So what else is happening in using technology?
I think nowadays we are trying to include as many students as possible in the classroom. And, most of them have like a different background. Ethnic background, linguistic background, family background, and educational background in some situations. And technology actually provides some tools to make inclusion and equity real and easier in world language classrooms. So we can have different versions of the same activity and adapt it to student level. So in this way, it's easier for teachers to differentiate in their instruction, and it's also easier for students to follow along. They can just practice with the ones that are created for them. Modified for them. So it's easier for inclusion.
And I think about inclusion also in a few different ways. When we think about, for example, students who have problems showing up to school for health reasons, for family reasons, for other reasons, you're providing them another access point to the material that
Yes.
allows them more than just somebody's notes. And I know somebody's notes is really helpful, maybe in social studies, maybe not, but it is not really helpful when you talk about foreign language or studying world language, because those single words and a few spellings does not really help you understand what happened. But technology can help deliver the vocabulary, the syntactic structure, whatever you're teaching that day, comprehension. Because it has a full activity with context and everything. So that's one way to make inclusion and equity. I think that the other thing is students can articulate their knowledge in different ways
Yes,
that
that's
is
true.
appropriate to them, and maybe the most important, especially for early learners, and that is that sense of safety and really, we talk about the emotional filter, to borrow the phrase from research. You feel really insecure speaking in a new language at the beginning,
Yeah.
and you don't want to sound like you don't know what you're doing. It makes you feel really uncomfortable at times, and technology helps negotiate that, especially early on, because you're potentially talking to a machine. You're recording yourself, you're creating a video, you're creating an audio, you're drawing. So it's a way to be actively using the language without that sense of judgment, and then when you're ready, you can articulate that wider. So especially if you're shy, if you're not very confident, it does allow you to have another access point to actually actively pronouncing the language. And we know from world language is written skill is really important. Reading and writing is our critical skills, but the oral skills are just as important, the listening and speaking. And speaking is that critical element that is so hard. I mean, I've been to China, I've tried to say a few words in Chinese. I am not very good at that, although we're both operating right now in our second language. So that is also true. So these are, again, ways to think about how do we make this a tool of inclusion and equity. And that's really important because technology can, on the other side, also be a tool of separating and keeping people out. So we need to make sure that that technology is truly accessible, that we're really thinking about them.
Yes, I'm 100% agree with you. Yeah, and also I would like to point out, like, a lot of teachers and students are using Fliply, like now it's called Flip.
Yeah.
Yeah, students actually can, those students who are not comfortable, they can record their voices and they can delete and redo it until they're ready to share it with their teachers and friends, instead of doing it on the spot in the classroom. That's a much easier way for them to do it. Yes.
And so, again, going back to that point that speaking is one of those critical skills that is one of the hardest for world language teachers to get to, is that these technologies actually allow a new access point. And we often talk about affordances. I mean, we write together occasionally
Yes.
about this topic, and we do research about this topic. And one of the things that we're highly aware of is how is technology really innovating? Because we're not saying do what you're doing on paper just on the technology, because if that's all you're doing and it's not making it more efficient or more productive learning, then it's pointless. I mean, we can use paper. Paper is fine. But one of the affordances here, and that's the term we like to use, it's like, what is it about this design that makes it inherently different? And the affordance here is the ability to record video or audio that allows a lot of practice. And if you think about the classroom of 20, if everybody's doing practice in front of the teachers, you've got 2 or 3 kids practicing at any point in time. But if you're using technology, all 20 can be each producing speech at the same time and practicing. That is a lot more practice in that very, very difficult realm of speaking and listening. So, what are we going to do? We're going to have a series of about 8 shows where we're going to really bring technologies that we think are ready to be used in a classroom in the world language classroom specifically, although some of them are technologies that are available across multiple domains, and we're going to have fun doing it.